Okay, I'll go very fast because I also realize you guys have been seeing like already 8 presentations, might be totally dizzy with so much. So I'm going to have a little different approach, a little disruptive. And I will start talking about the cause that my NGO defends before talking about my NGO, because I think it's worth a few minutes on that. So first about climate change and the model that we developed, or that we follow. It's possible to still do something for climate. Then we'll talk about our model more specifically, the impact on sustainability that forests have, the growth and the achievements, and then the market potential, as well as how BrightWolves can help. And there are 2 different ways that we see. And notice the Barack Obama a quote on the left-hand side. I think it's worth saying that. So doing something about climate, and I know some of you are from the shift and others are all interested in sustainability. It is still possible, even though 3 weeks ago we received this terrible news from IPCC, the last report called Code Red for Humanity. It is really raising, the flag. And it's like probably the last opportunity we have to do something, so we better wake up. And it's not just about recycling or plastic, what we're talking about. It's, as you know, it's much more serious. In terms of the area that my NGO takes care of, it's the forest. And we now know from the different studies, not just this last IPCC, but the recent studies, how much is needed for what impact. So a lot of publications have come out talking about 10 million square kilometers or 1 billion hectares. That is the equivalent of the United States in terms of surface that we need to add to the existing forest in the world in order to have a significant carbon capture and sequestration. So that means we need to add to the current forest 25%, which will sequester 200 gigatons of CO2. And this represents an absorption of sequestration of 25% of the excess carbon in the atmosphere. Because as you all know, I don't think I need to tell you about that. It's all about the excess carbon that we need to get rid of. And what WeForest does, the NGO that I started 10 years ago, is making Earth cooler with trees. And we are very encouraged by what we see, and we're not the only ones. As you know, there's many other, fortunately, organizations doing that. So we are a Belgian-based NGO, non-profit, maybe different from the other players and the other in the competition today. What we do is we restore forest, engaging local communities in the tropical countries. And it's with them, for them, that we do it. So the social aspect of it is fundamental if you want something to last, because you can't do it from Brussels, right? You got to do it with the people. And so the expertise that we have in our team and the way we do it is with a landscape approach. We take a whole region, we focus on the forestry activities. We obviously look at the carbon and the water science in order to make it a workable solution. We focus on the biodiversity and the wildlife that we want to protect or enhance. We work on the soil quality and also water in the soil. And very important, the socioeconomic activity, so that the farmers or the local communities get more out of standing trees than timber, potentially, or charcoal. We work in tropical countries, and we have obviously regular measurements of the impact that we do. And we can say that we address all of those SDGs in our projects. We create jobs for women primarily, because planting trees is not too heavy, and nursery work is also very suitable for women. We work in sustainable agriculture. The women, as I said, sorry, that's number 5, are empowered in what we do. And the water cycle, number 6, is very central to our work. Even though most people talk about carbon, we like to focus on water as well. And water being water in the soil, being cloud nucleation, being everything. Economic growth for the community is something we invest a lot of money in. Also number 13, which is the climate. Obviously it's the carbon, it's also the water, but here it's more the carbon, that 50% of a tree is a sequester by 50% of the biomass of a tree is sequestered carbon. And if you protect the tree for the long term, then you sequester the carbon for the long term. Number 15, we combat desertification in many areas in the world, and we enhance the biodiversity. And we can't do that alone, so partnerships are essential for our success. WeForest is not a startup to some extent. We started 10 years ago and we are already 50 people. So probably compared to the other startups you're interviewing, it's quite different. And so that's why the approach here is a little disruptive. It's a little different from what you've seen. We work with corporates. Duvel, for example, is already one of your clients. We work with UCB, Nike, Shopify. We have like 450 companies around the world. So you're saying, well, why is she pitching this here? Because this is for startups. Well, be patient. I'll tell you what we think is still in startup mode or in infant shoes. We are going to be reaching actually in September around 50 million trees, restored or protected 40,000 hectares, which is the equivalent of 2.5 times the Brussels region. This sounds nice, but it's actually peanuts. It's actually a drop of water on hot sand because we know it works. We've been making a lot of noise about it. We're very happy to see many others do what we do, but there is so much need and so urgent. It's so urgent to replicate. So the approach that we're suggesting for today is that you guys could help promote the movement because you are involved in advising corporations, and whether they plant with us, whether they plant with anybody else, that they support, they stop deforestation obviously in their supply chain, and that they support reforestation. But the interesting thing here also is that we've decided this year that we can't continue to grow as we're growing. We're doubling our impact every year. We're growing big time, hiring amazing teams. We can't continue to go too fast because you know the risk of that. So we've decided to kind of start an accelerator where we want to help other guys to scale because we're nonprofit. So we like others to copy what we do. Everything that we do is open source. We give it. So we are just starting to think, how can we accelerate and create clones of ourselves around the world? And this is where we thought you guys could be helpful. We need hundreds of new WeForests. Just to look at the numbers for a second. We said before, we need to grow more forests, the equivalent of the USA. So 25% more forests than what we have today in the world. Yet every year, we lose 3 times the area of Belgium. We lose 10 million hectares every year in different places in the world. There is a lot of reforestation like WeForest and many other organizations, but we're not catching up. We're still losing every year because we're like right now just restoring half of what's being degraded. So let alone growing to get, the 25% additional. So it's just, we are losing on this and we need it big time. And so what we're saying is we need this acceleration. We need to empower small NGOs in their regions to take a lead. We see a lot of small NGOs in Africa, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia. They don't have the capabilities, they don't have the skills, they have the willingness, but they're not able. So we are helping some, but we need to do much more. And that's our ambition, besides obviously what we do directly. So again, you could help us with the conceptualization of our accelerator model and see what could we do? How do we take care of the funding, of the training? How do we select candidates? How do we take responsibility or not for the work they do? Because that could be very heavy. So we'd love a sounding board to help us define that this coming year, actually, would be for 2022. And then the second, as I mentioned before, the raising awareness and visibility for this cause, because this cause, as you saw the numbers, is in its infant shoes as well. So it's not WeForest as a startup, but the whole cause needs to be pushed. we need everyone, we need every company to start acting. And that's, cry for help. That's basically the purpose of this short pitch. So thank you, and I welcome your comments and questions.
Thank you. It's I really admire your passion and work. A question is how what's like the setup that you do? How do you create a kind of economic activity in the what are the beyond the trees? What are the other actions that you take?
Well, for example, in many of the projects we have beehives because honey is quite a good income, and so it gets sold, and it's obviously connected to the health of the flora around. So it's directly correlated to that. In the mangrove project that I'm visiting next week in Senegal, we're going to be working with oysters because it is generating income, but it's also protecting the coast where the mangroves are. So every situation is different. You need to explore what people need, what people do culturally, and then come up with suggestions of how to do that. The difficulty that we have is it's easy to distribute money, but we don't want to do that. We want people to generate their money because that gives it much more value. So development aid is not what we do. We really try to develop economic models, but that's very complicated because you enter in very different supply chains and you've got to find experts. So it's still there. Also, there is work to be done in improving the supply chains.
Can you share some numbers? So you share the number of 50, 60 employees or people working at WeForest. Do you have other numbers to share? Or?
Yeah, I didn't put that in the slides. Indeed, we are going to be raising 10 million euros this year, which is almost double from last year. It's like just as that's meant by exponential growth. Yeah, we impact thousands. I mean, we'd have to see how many in total, but thousands of farmers every year in every project. Like now in Ethiopia, we've just worked with 23,000 farmers, which means 110,000 people just in one project. So depending on the project, it's a very different model. What else can I say? We are not trying, we don't want to continue growing at this pace because we don't believe in huge organizations that become very rigid. We have the advantage of being super flexible and free of, finding out like what works best and inventing new models and copying others and sharing. So that's kind of who we are in our culture.
Yeah, I have a question. Sometimes there are some, let's say, cynical voices around reforestation, where then the argument is like, for instance, you lose farmland when you plant new trees, and somewhere on the other side of the world, they will chop trees to create new farmland to compensate in a way. So yeah. How do you go about that criticism, or how do you try to avoid it? Because I think there is some truth in it.
Yes, it's definitely, there's all kind of things happening. What we do is we obviously, there's several questions in what you said, right? One is, do we replace farmland with trees? Well, no, because when we have farmers somewhere, we plant trees with them on their farm so that their yield actually is going to be better. Because if you plant nitrogen fixing trees, your maize crops are going to grow much better, right? So actually, where there are farmers, we work with them in agroforestry. Where there are no farmers, where there's community land, then obviously the land is degraded, and we measure the additionality. Like what we're doing is bringing additional value. It's not, displacing. That's fundamental in the model. We have also certification of our projects, and there are several criteria: additionality and no leakage, because what you're talking about is leakage. And that's a fundamental criteria, otherwise you don't even get certified for the quality of your work. So, I mean, obviously it's happening all over, you're right. And it should not be. That's why also we have a vast interest in influencing others in doing it right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie-Noëlle, for this great pitch and those answers, very clear. It's the end of the 15 minutes.
Okay, already.
Yes, it went fast, yes. It was really interesting.
Yes, I hope you had fun.